Magandang gabi sa iyong lahat. Good evening to everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us
This meeting is being recorded.
My name is Marivel Tarouk. I'm a journalist and the weekend anchor of CBC Toronto News and host of a TV program called Our Toronto. And I'm also honored to be your host for tonight's event, which is called Breaking Invisibility Politics. And it is the second of the three-part series of the Philippine Advancement Through Arts and Culture, which we all know as PATAC, of their events in celebration of Filipino Heritage Month in June, something we're all so proud to be a part of, I know. We also acknowledge the support from Filipino Workers Network and Saludo 2021. I also have to acknowledge that we are hosting this event from the ancestral traditional territories of the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, and in particular, the Mississaugas of the New Credit. So what's going to happen tonight? This is a 90-minute, 1.5 hour evening of sharing stories and experiences. Our guest speakers have 10 minutes each to talk about their experience and learnings in the area of politics. And after every two speakers, we will have a cultural presentation. If time allows, we will have a question and answer period. I know a lot of our participants and those joining us generally ask some really good questions. And so we'll try to allot some time for that. For now, though, we request that you kindly mute your microphones for the duration of the event until the question and answer period. So if you have questions that come up, please share them in the chat. Or also if you're watching on Facebook Live, you can put your question in the comment section. And we will try to take all of those questions as we go through this evening. So joining us tonight for our opening remarks is Nova Relosa de Leon. She is a board member of PATAC. Good evening, Nova. It's over to you.
Evening, magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Thank you, Marivel, for taking time out of your busy schedule to MC for us tonight. Marivel has the distinction of being the first Filipino journalist on CBC, right? She has been in the industry for close to 30 years now, so veteran journalist na siya. And she has won awards for her current affairs program, Our Toronto. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, the Government of Canada, United Food and Commercial Workers Canada, United Steel Workers, Local 1998, SMDC, and Sharif Isa and Associates of IG Wealth Management. Now, if you'll allow me, I will just give a quick introduction of who we are and what we do. We are the Philippine Advancement Through Arts and Culture, or otherwise known as PATAC. So PATAC started in 2007. We're a network of organizations and volunteer individuals. And through the arts, we aim to bring forward issues being faced by people of Filipino origin here in Canada. A lot of you here may not be aware that PATAC was the main driving force behind the Filipino Heritage Month. So let me share how it all began. It was 5 years ago when our president, Paulina Corpus, started a petition in November 2016. And then this was brought forward to the Toronto City Council by Councillor Nathan Shan and was passed in November 2017. We also approached the Toronto Catholic District School Board, and they even went as far as declaring Filipino Heritage Day on June 12 across the 200 schools under their jurisdiction. So that was a win for us. On the way to Ottawa, there were some bumps along the way, but with the help of MP Salma Sahid, Bill 155, M155 was passed, and we got the official Canada-wide designation from Ottawa in October 2018. Now, fast forward to 3 years later, with the help of MPP Dolly Begum, Bill 217 received royal assent, and just in time, in May 2021, it was also declared in the province of Ontario. So it has come full circle. We now have, we're now celebrating Filipino Heritage Month in all levels, in the municipal, provincial, and federal levels. So, but the work doesn't stop here. Beyond promoting our culture, Filipino Heritage Month is an opportunity to start more meaningful conversations and more purposeful actions, which brings us here to our Breaking Invisibility series. If you weren't able to join us last week, we talked to Filipino community leaders in different parts of Canada. But tonight, we will be talking to another set of leaders who have taken the next step in public service. So let's just take a quick look at the numbers. If we have 900,000 Filipinos in Canada at present, there's almost 1 million of us now. And one would think that we would have more distinct leadership roles in different sectors or better representation in all levels of government. But sadly, that's not the case. If we do a little math, there are 1,100 provincial and federal elected positions that are available to us. And if we comprise 2.4% of the population, then we would need at least 26 Filipinos in the legislature for proper representation. So far, we've only had one Filipino MP ever, and that's Dr. Ray Pagtakan, who will be joining us later tonight. And that was a long time ago. That was 17 years ago since his last term. So what are we missing here? We'll try to answer that question tonight. What are we missing? This gap is definitely not due to a lack of leaders, as you can see from our panel of guests tonight. We have a great mix of speakers for you who will be sharing their personal stories of their journey in politics. And we hope to gather some insights on the challenges that they face and hopefully find ways by which we can support them and other Filipino candidates present and future. So let me turn you now over to Maribel to introduce our guests.
Many thanks, Nova, and that it is always so stark when you see the numbers in front of you, which shows that even though our community has done a lot of work to lay the groundwork, we have a ways to go in getting that representation up in all levels of all governments in Canada. So thank you, Nova, for that lesson, which is important for us to base our discussion on tonight. So shall we move on to our first speaker for the evening? She is France Stoner. She has a master's degree in counseling, psychotherapy, and spirituality from the universities of Ottawa and St. Paul. To serve the needs of immigrant communities, she now works as a mental health counselor and continues to champion for equality and justice as a longtime community organizer. She's currently a political candidate in the next municipal election for the district of Snowdon in the Côte-de-Neige Notre-Dame-de-Grâce borough. She's also the first Filipina to ever run for office in Quebec, to put a point on those numbers that we were just talking about. I'd like to welcome France Stoner to be our first speaker tonight.
Thank you so much, Maribel. Thank you, everyone, for having me. Before I jump into that, there was actually a little piece missing there. I'm actually the first Filipina to run in the district of Snowdon, but there hasn't been a Filipina to run in Quebec in the last 15 years. So there has been that has run before, but it has been a long time. So I think it's time. So hello, everyone. Bonsoir, tout le monde. Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. I'm so happy to be here. I want to start by acknowledging that I am currently located in Jojage, which is colonially known as Montreal. This is the land of the Ganyendehaga Nation, and I want to give thanks to the original stewards for the land and water that I benefit from as an immigrant settler here. So as mentioned, I'm super excited to be here tonight. I am pretty sure I'm the newest one to politics here. I never thought I would be in this position. I really didn't think I was going to take this route. As mentioned, I'm a psychotherapist and I'm also a community organizer. I come from a neighborhood called Cotinez, and it is a predominantly newcomer neighborhood and with a strong Filipino population. And it's also the area that contains kind of Montreal's little Filipino town. So for some time, I've been doing individual therapy, some group work. I do a lot of youth mentorship with the Filipino student groups. Mental health workshops. I also take care of the local university's women's basketball team, doing mental health check-ins with them. And the team is also predominantly Filipino, Black, and Brown. So it's really, really nice to be able to work with youth from our communities. So what got me here? Never thought I would be here, as I mentioned. Rubbed shoulders with a few political people in my work, kind of in academia, doing conference organizing and that sort of thing, and also during community work. And one day, the incumbent mayor of my borough's chief of staff reached out to me, and she kind of straight up asked me to run, and I didn't even know what that meant. So I was like, no, don't even know what that means, not even sure what a city councilor does. And she kind of just kept reaching out. So finally, I asked her, what else can I do? I don't think city council's for me. I actually don't really know much about it at this point. So what else can I do? And basically, I joined a team to start writing policy because the incumbent mayor decided to start her own party. So what's really, really interesting about Cotinez NDG is that we're an incredibly diverse and predominantly racialized neighborhood. The class disparities are really, really stark. We have some of the richest people who live in our neighborhood, just like we have some of the poorest. What's interesting as well is we've actually never, forget Filipina, forget women of color. We've actually never even had a person of color on our council, which is quite appalling for how diverse our neighborhood is. So about in October, I joined this policy platform team and just started learning a lot as we were putting together our platform. Putting together our platform was something we did a little bit differently as well. We really made sure to reach out to the community for it to be kind of a community discussion and making sure we were having voices from everyone in our neighborhood. As I worked more and more on this platform, I was studying up more on the neighborhood, reading more about different numbers that we're going through, the statistics. And as I learned more, as someone who has a background, in feminist studies, critical race theory, and that sort of thing, the systemic racism was just undeniable. Like there was no way to kind of unsee it. So one of the things that really jumped at me at first was that in terms of municipal services on the whole island of Montreal, each citizen, and I'm rounding off numbers here just to be accessible, but each citizen basically gets approximately $550 per head in terms of services. It's kind of how it's calculated. But for some reason, our borough, who is again the most populated, more newcomers, more racialized, we are getting close to $200 less. This has been since 2006. There was a reform in how the budget was done, and nothing has been remedied since. And it seems that like everyone who kind of tries hits different roadblocks. So the incumbent mayor, who I have joined her party, decided that she just really, really wanted to put together a team that reflected the neighborhood and that would really address these different issues. Yes, so I grew up in this neighborhood. I'm from here. I was born in the Philippines. We got here when I was 2 years old. I grew up here quite poor and with very limited resources. Another issue in our neighborhood is that a lot of the youth have a high school dropout rate. And again, it's our youth. So 47% of our neighborhood is one with families of young children. So we actually have six elementary schools. So that's a lot of kids. But then when it's time to go to high school, we actually only have one. So what does that say to how we are investing in the youth in our neighborhood? It's almost as if we're like, well, you guys are going to drop out of high school anyway, so what's the point? When actually it should be the other way around of, we know that our youth need this support, so how come these things are not in place and not implemented? So I have my other colleagues who have also announced recently. So in the neighboring district, Patrice César will be running for Côte-des-Neiges, and another colleague named Sabine Montpierre. And again, if the three of us were to be elected, it would be the first time there would be people in council who are people of color. And then in the context of my colleagues, the first time we would have a Black man and a Black woman representing a neighborhood that also has a strong Black community. So again, never thought I would be here, just kind of the way I was making the connections and the way that helped me kind of decide is I just kind of started asking around me, what are you looking for in a city councilor? What does that mean to you? And most folks were like, we don't even know them. We've never even seen them. We don't even know their names. We've invited them to events or annual general meetings and they don't show up. And these are actually spaces that I was already frequenting as a community organizer and kind of already had these connections. In terms of actual skills, you know, folks feel like they need their city councilors to be present. They need city councilors who listen. And I'm a psychotherapist. That's exactly what I do. I sit, I listen. And with that, if you will allow me, I can also present you a different perspective. Another thing that's interesting about the position I'm in, which actually just changed this week, so we'll see how things unfold. But when I announced, I was basically running against an incumbent who had been in office for 38 years. He's actually known in Montreal as the longest sitting incumbent city councilor here in Montreal. And I announced May 5th, and we were kind of waiting to hear what his move was going to be. And this week, he actually announced his retirement. So currently, I'm running unopposed, but that could still change. Our elections are not until November 7th. But regardless, I'm here, I'm gonna bring it. One thing our neighborhood also suffers from is a lot of political apathy. So we have a low voter turnout rate, and I totally see where that comes from. So I think that this is also where some of my community organizing skills are gonna be brought to the table. You need to have good pedagogy. You know, a lot of folks don't even, like I said, don't even know what their city councilors do, don't even know how to vote, are not sure if they're registered. And some have also pretty much given up because they don't see themselves reflected in council. So I really want to kind of do that education piece, which I think is important. Part of me, of course, would love to win, but I think it's a win if our communities are also just more educated in this whole process. Some don't get involved, as I mentioned, because they don't see themselves reflected, but we tend to forget that municipal politics is actually our first connection to politics. There are people who make really, really important decisions on our lives that affect our everyday, be it making sure our water's running, snow removal, cleanliness. Again, I'm in an immigrant neighborhood that has also a lot of apartment buildings. We have a lot of people who live intergenerationally in smaller spaces. So our parks are very well used and very, very well loved. And, you know, just making sure things are up to par when it comes to just all these building coatings. The reason why a lot of Filipinos live in this neighborhood is because we're actually surrounded by a lot of the major hospitals here. And who are the ones who work in hospitals? You know, all our peoples are nurses, doctors, frontline workers, all these really, really important people that keep us safe. So some folks have asked me, during COVID, why COVID? That you're kind of like putting your hat in the game. What a crazy time to put your hat in the game. Well, democracy waits for no one. This is one thing. And another thing, who is the person who's kind of going to step up for these people in our neighborhood who literally keep us safe and make sure that we're all okay. So those are the different things that I've been going through here. Really excited to hear and learn more from the more seasoned politicians here, and would love to keep growing and building with everyone. And I'll pass it back to you, Maribel. Thank you, everyone.
Very insightful presentation, Franz. Thank you so much for that. And we see that engagement increases in communities when there are elected officials who come from those communities. So already, I think with the slate of candidates running, there may already be that engagement, but it'll be fascinating to watch. So thank you, Franz. Our second speaker for the evening is Julius Tiangson, and he is a former candidate for Member of Parliament for York Centre and for Mississauga. He is also the founder of Filipino International Network and an advocate for temporary foreign workers and new immigrants, and certainly not a stranger in the political circles here in the province of Ontario. So we would like to welcome next Julius Tiangson.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the invite here. Maayong gabi sa inyong tanan, na imbag na rabii to those who are Ilocano speaking. I'm not Ilocano, but I am Bisaya as well as Ilonggo. So forgive me sometimes if I interchange my Tagalog and Bisaya. Sometimes I'm known to do that. Anyway, it is an incredible pleasure as well as a privilege actually to be invited in this incredible group of people that are in fact in the forefront right now of political representation. Indeed, we are underrepresented, and I am trying my level best in my own capacity to make sure that we are also represented in the federal level. Now, my pathway, or at least what took me to run as a political candidate way back in 2015, as well as in 2020 during the pandemic, started actually in the city of Saskatoon. And I was a young accountant at that time, 21 years old, arrived in 1984, 85, and got connected with a few Filipinos in Saskatoon. At that time, there were only less than, I would say, probably 500 or 600 Filipinos. But overwhelmingly, the number of Filipinos in there were in fact what we now refer to as live-in caregiver participants. At that time, there was no such thing as a live-in caregiver participant. They were all domestic helper or domestic worker, actually. And that was their designation in Saskatoon, with no pathway actually to citizenship. And then in about 1988, 1989, I got introduced to a Filipina who was one of those who came prior to 1992. And it was in 1992 when the right to citizenship pathway was granted to many of the caregiver participants. But this individual, her name was Cora. Cora had 3 children. And she came to Saskatoon, actually, via Singapore. I didn't realize that in Singapore that you're only allowed, I think, about 2 years term, and then you have to go back to the Philippines, then you have to change your name and go back to Singapore again with another assumed name. So she came actually with a number of information that were not necessarily true, or what we would say immaterial in terms of her ability to perform her work as a caregiver. But nevertheless, when the opportunity actually came when they were already granted that right of citizenship. And she now has to declare that she has 3 children, and she now has to declare her real name. And all of a sudden, she is faced with the possible deportation because of what they would refer to as discrepancy in her application. And there were 4 of them actually that I decided to actually represent. At that time, I really did not know what the law is all about, what the immigration or the pathway towards citizenship for live-in caregiver participants were all about. But I tried my level best and argued on the basis of the fact that the information that they have provided, in as much as they were not necessarily truthful, but they were not material to the performance of their work. Gladly, the adjudicator at that time saw it my way or our way, and forgiven actually their misrepresentation. And, now those 4 individuals are happily married. They have their own families. They brought their families over. Many of them are business owners. All 4 of them are actually business owners already in the city of Saskatoon. So I saw from that initial encounter with these women that we do need representation in government. But the pathway that I've taken was through advocacy. And so when I moved here in Mississauga way back in the year 2000, I started to get connected with a number of people that were already involved in advocating for the live-in caregiver program. And from there, I started my advocacy, connected with many of the groups, organized the first Ontario Alliance of Caregivers. Actually, there were about 18 caregiver organizations that formed together in such a way that we can be a powerful voice in advocating for the rights of caregivers, and a number of regulatory changes that have been in place as a result of that advocacy. And kudos to those who are still in the forefront and still making some important changes for that program to actually become even more fair and just for all of the participants. Now, as a result of my advocacy and as a result also of starting also a community center called the Gateway Center for New Canadians, which actually helps settle thousands of newcomers, not just Filipinos, but everybody else, as we were funded by Citizenship and Immigration Canada. But nevertheless, the advocacy of making sure that Filipinos are actually represented in many aspects in our system was first and foremost in my involvement with that new Canadian organization. As a result of that, in 2015, decided to actually seek the nomination for Mississauga Center. And in party politics, those who are able to actually sell more members and able to mobilize the community would in fact win the nomination. Now, the nomination is probably the most difficult process in party politics, but I know that we can do it. We've proven it in Mississauga Center. We've proven it also in York Center. In Mississauga Center, we bested 2 very powerful communities, and those communities can easily win over us. But the Filipinos in Mississauga Center, and as well as others, banded together and making sure that my candidacy as a nominated candidate for the Conservative Party in Mississauga Center would actually succeed. And we did. We succeeded with 27 votes. And it was a narrow margin, but nevertheless, that gave us a foothold in winning at least the nomination and running in the 2015 election. Now, fast forward in 2020, a member of parliament resigned in York Center. That gave us the opportunity actually to field a candidate in there. And so when the party started looking into the possibility of fielding a Filipino candidate, they did approach me. And the consequence of that is I did run in 2020 in October, and we almost did it. And it was an incredible as well as a very exciting run, because our deficit was only 701 votes. And it was only then I realized that, yes, Filipinos are ready to elect a fellow Filipino candidate if adequately supported by the party machinery, supported also by the grassroots, in the organization, in the political party. Now, how do we get involved in party politics? Well, first and foremost, the most basic is by a membership. And in that membership, you can be elected in the riding association as a board member. And as a board member in the riding association, you can be involved in choosing who would be the candidate for that particular riding. And so it is so important that we understand that process. It is probably the most difficult process in party politics, simply because you are actually fighting amongst your own colleagues and people that you know as your friends and people who are of the same party affiliation. But the moment you do win the nomination, the party machinery comes behind you, will support you, and eventually we would be adequately represented as part of the slate of a political party. So very important that we get involved by buying a membership, getting involved, volunteering, and making sure that you are always in the forefront of many of the events of the political party. The second thing, other than volunteering, other than buying a membership, volunteering for the party, making sure that you organize. Also, we organize ourselves. Include your friends. Mostly my family is also with me most of the time, making sure that many Filipinos would actually participate in many of the events of the party. Canvas for other candidates also as well, making sure that our presence through volunteering is actually felt in the political system or the political party that you choose to affiliate with. So that is my pathway actually to political involvement, Maribel, and I do hope that I will be able to encourage as many people as possible to join a political party, buy a membership, be a volunteer, be part of a riding association, and eventually, if you do have the courage to actually put your name as a candidate to be nominated to represent that party in that particular riding. So thank you very much and good evening to all. Mayong gabi sa inyong tanan.
Maraming salamat, Julius, and for just that very basic step-by-step explanation of this process, because I think there are so many who don't even know where to begin, may have the desire to be engaged in the political process and just sometimes feel lost in how to get involved, particularly with the major parties, because they are such huge machines. So it's very valuable insight from you, Julius, about your example of how you got involved, but also how everyone else can, those steps that we can take. So maraming salamat for that. Our third speaker for the evening is a trustee in Ward 8 of the Toronto Catholic District School Board, and that's been since 2012. He is also the regional director of Ontario Catholic School Trustees Association. He's also a lecturer at the School of Computer Studies at Seneca and at York University in Toronto. So please, everyone, welcome Gary Tanuaan, and for some more insight on your pathway to politics in Canada.
Thank you, Maribel, for hosting and for the introduction. Yeah, I'm no longer the lecturer there. That was 20 years ago, but yeah. My
Still
congratulations.
counts.
Yeah, my congratulations, and very grateful to Paulina for initiating this series, especially tonight's breaking Invisibility Politics, Finding Our Voice through PATAC, Filipino Advancement through Arts and Culture, Filipino Workers Network, and Saludo 2021 for the sake of our Filipino community and kababayans. I also want to commend and thank my fellow esteemed speakers here tonight, Francis Stoner, Julius Changson, Rowena Santos, Mabel Elmore, and Honorable Rady Pagtakhan, all outstanding leaders and pillars of our Filipino-Canadian community for taking the time to share their experiences. Today, June 19, I remember there's a thought in our schools, is the birthday of our national hero. And it's a very apt time to be discussing this political invisibility that he broke. And I reckon he found his voice when he spoke out against the injustices of his day. Allow me to do my job first as the only Filipino-Canadian trustee in Toronto And then I will share my personal story on how I got into the political scene and some of my experiences. We're celebrating the 4th Filipino Heritage Month of TCDSB, the 123rd anniversary of Philippine independence, and the once-in-a-lifetime quincentennial jubilee of the arrival of Christianity in the Philippines, QJCP. As Nova showed us in her presentation, we have officially proclaimed and adopted June as Filipino Heritage Month and June 12 as Filipino Heritage Day to be celebrated every year since 2018. At Toronto Catholic, the Gifted to Give theme for the Quincentennial Jubilee has been adopted as the main theme for our Filipino Heritage Month this year, as it resonates very well with the Filipino-Canadian folks when we give back and share with everyone the gift of faith, which we were blessed with half a millennium ago. We're most blessed to celebrate the historic milestone signing of the proclamation of the QJCP at TCDSB last year and this year, a year-long celebration, I might say. The proclamation recognizes and honors the rich history, contributions, dynamic culture, and vibrant Catholic faith of the Philippines. We're indeed honored at the TCDSB to be the first foreign government institution worldwide to recognize and proclaim the 500-year commemoration in the Philippines. The Filipino diaspora is now the largest ethnic group within the TCDSB family of schools, with more than 30,000 students, representing 1 in 3 of our Catholic students. The official recognition of the Filipino Heritage Month at all levels of government are of great importance and significance to all of us, so we can provide our Filipino-Canadian youth with the opportunity to understand and connect to their roots and enrich our school communities with the sharing of our faith, culture, and traditions with others. I believe the greatest aspect of our Filipino heritage is that our Christian faith and values have been firmly intertwined and has very much become an integral part of our culture and tradition over the centuries. The worldwide celebration of this 500-year anniversary of Christianity in the Philippines is a huge testament to who we are today and what comes as second nature for all of us when we're doing our best and all we can do to help others in need, especially in the healthcare and education service sectors. So, going to my lengthy to my story, in 2012, I got a call from the late Senator Enverga, and he said, "Are you going to run for trustee?" I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You have not been looking at the news, right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry." He said, "Now I've been promoted to the Senate." I said, "Oh my goodness, congratulations, John," right? Olive John then. So, and I said, "Why don't you do it?" I said, "Well, let me pray first and see if that's for me." After 1 week, he said, "Hey, you have to stop praying and start doing it or doing." So I said, "Okay, I think the Lord wants me to do this." And then by magic, I don't know what, I would have lost the election, to be honest with you. Like, I don't know, I have a clue on what this is all about, right? So basically, somebody came up to me and said, "We will help you organize the campaign and all that." So actually, I met myself on the streets. When I say that, when I started knocking on doors, especially on the Filipino homes, they were very indifferent, right? So I said, these people are like me before, because I see myself in them. I don't want to get involved. I have my house, I have my kids, I have my car, right? Don't rock the boat. And I was like that for a while. So now I met myself. I said, yeah, that's the problem. That we have lots of Filipinos. I was talking to Paulina other night, and I said, if we, in a certain ward, I won't mention which ward, in the Toronto area, if all the Filipinos come out, even 80% of them, you will win the campaign and the election hands down, right? There are more than 4,000, 5,000 in that area alone. And that, by statistics alone, will win the election, okay? But the problem is no more than 15% come out on election day, right? So that's the problem, I think, when we talk about, representation. There's no lack of trying. I think the last election or the other one, we had like 6 or 7 Filipino-Canadians running at the board level. So that's one issue. And the other one that I found that's most helpful is we have to engage all the diverse communities and all walks of life, not only our Filipino, because when you get elected, we're not only representing the Filipino-Canadians, but everybody, right? So during my time, it was a by-election. So Julius knows this very much. It's different when you're in a general election and in by-election. By-election, you have to pick a certain interest. What are they interested in? In my case, at that time, it was this strong sense of faith and practice in our Catholic schools, back to basics. And that's what I've been doing, right? I won't go into the details, but these days our Catholic identity in the schools are challenged and threatened. So that's one of the issues. And again, if you're looking, I would like to plug in for our Catholic teachers, right? Because if you look at the statistics, we have 15,000 teachers, and how many do we have? So we have 1 of 3. That means we should have 4,000 to 5,000 teachers there, right? Representing the schools. St. Margaret, for instance, 95% Filipinos. I couldn't believe it. You go to one of the major schools, Marshall McLuhan, Francis Lieberman, you see people coming out from PTA meetings and parent council meetings. They're like 70, 80% Filipinos. I just could talk to them in Filipino, right? So technically, I'd like to have more Filipino teacher and student representation. And this needs money, and I'm trying to advocate at the provincial level and even reach out to the MP level. Investment in cultural and heritage education through key roles in education. Number 2, prioritize teachers of the cultural capital to teach students in the diaspora, right? Removing barriers to recertification of Philippine teachers, advocacy for equivalency of experience, education, the faculties of education, and lastly, empowering Philippine communities for mentorship and networking. Work with Philippine Cultural Heritage Centers like our FCT and others, right? We have a lot of them. Communicate the value and worth of culturally reflective role models, such as all the leaders here. So we have no lack of shortage of that. And advocate for culturally aware, relevant initiatives in career centers to promote entering non-menial fields such as education. So, daghang salamat sa inyong tanan. Mabuhay and God bless.
Maraming salamat, Trustee Danuan. It was also very helpful to hear from the board level too, because that's a very important part of the overall political process. Often that's where you get your start and get your bearings, and then you can move on to other levels of government too. But it's such a micro level representation, and it's clear why you are such a strong voice at that board level, and a very effective one too. So thank you, Trustee Danuan. How about we take a cultural break, since we are celebrating Filipino heritage all month, and I can think of no one better than Belinda Corpus to do that for us. She is a Filipino-Canadian multidisciplinary artist, actor, singer, musician, creator, producer, based in Toronto, which is Treaty 13 territory. Her EP, All I Am, has garnered national radio play, including features on CBC Radio. Her compositions have received critical acclaim, including I Hear You, which is co-written with Laura Swanky, featured on Collective Orders Volume 3 and the Canadian Women's Composers Project. So, everyone, I'd like to call on Belinda for our cultural presentation.
Demolition men rumbles through smoking mountain holes.
Municipalities, a youth mentor, and an advocate for women, affordable housing, environmental issues, and sustainable development, and a trailblazer herself, the first person of Filipino heritage to be elected to Brampton City Council. So breaking barriers all over the place. I'd like to welcome Rowena Santos.
Salamat and good evening, everyone. Happy Filipino Heritage Month. And Marval, it is always such an honor to share the stage with you as well as everybody here this evening. It's always a humbling experience to be surrounded by my fellow kababayan leaders across the country and across the province. So thank you very much, Paulina and PATAC, for inviting me here this evening. I have to say that the contribution of our Filipino community is becoming more and more and more noticed, and it really is an honor to see the growth of our community, not just by population, but also in terms of being recognized across the country. And organizations like this and the work that you are all doing, that we are all doing together, is so helpful. The title of tonight is Breaking Our Invisibility. And I have to tell you, as the first Filipino elected in Brampton and councillor in the region of Peel, as I sit at many leadership tables, whether that's at FCM or the council tables, and I'm sure many of you will connect with this, it's really lonely. We don't have enough kababayan, we don't have enough Filipinos around the leadership tables. And so that is why the work, the continuous work and the growing work that all of you are doing is so important, because we need to make space at those tables for our voices. My family, my parents came to Toronto in the 1970s when there was a flood in immigration. And my parents, we lived in the area of Jane and Finch in Toronto. And at the age of 5 years old, my parents saved enough money. They worked very hard. They saved enough money and they bought a little house on Professor's Lake in Brampton. And I remember going up there because I went to St. John Bosco School. And in grade 1, I was sitting around the classroom floor, and the teacher had asked us, because there was like an increase in diversity. And the teacher, I guess, wanted to hear from the students who were in grade 1 where they came from, what country they came from. And when the question came to me and she asked, where do you come from, Rowena? I remember vividly because I was so nervous to answer the question. And this is where the connection with France is, because I was so scared to say that I was Filipino that I said instead that I was from Quebec. And I share that story because during that time in the 1980s, 1990s, when there was so much immigration, many of our Asian Filipino communities came to the country with a sense of bringing some level of colonialism with us, in that we came to Canada for a better life, and our job was to work hard, put our head down, not cause trouble, not raise our voices. And if anyone said anything bad, don't worry about it, just keep working hard. And that is the spirit of the Filipinos, is to keep working hard, because we are blessed to be where we are. We are blessed to have what we have. And what we have seen during the pandemic is this increase in anti-Asian racism. And what I have witnessed as an elected official, which I didn't have before in the 12 years that I was organizing as a Filipino, getting other people elected, was our young people rising up and saying, no, anti-Asian racism is wrong. And we are now going to start to call it out. And if you've noticed, around the entire country, I have seen youth organizations and people speaking up, people who've been doing tremendous work, like Lou Rose Mercader, who is here tonight, who've been doing so much work to make sure that our voices are heard. And so I share that as a kababayan, as a Filipino elected in Brampton, it is lonely. But in the same way that France is trying to trailblaze in Quebec, it was part of the reason why I ran in Brampton. Brampton is 73% visible minorities. And in the previous term of council, there was like one person of color out of 11. And in my 12 years prior working at Queen's Park and helping to get other people elected, and in my commitment to get people of color and women elected, I realized that here in my own hometown, we didn't have representation. And perhaps now was the time in 2018 to run myself and take all of those skills of organizing and networks to run myself. And I ran as the first, as a Filipina. And I was very proud to do so, door to door, and to hear the residents speak when I would talk to them about being Filipino, how much they love the Filipino community was amazing to see. And that's a level of support, because they know we are the personal support workers, we are the nurses, we are the people who work tremendously hard. And so that respect and that support is there. And so when we are all, regardless of party, regardless of what level of government, when we are all working together to support each other, I think it is so important that we have events like this. And even when we don't have events like this, but we are inviting other speakers to come to our community to present to us, I think it's also important for us, especially because the majority of leaders still in this country are white. We need to make sure that they hear us. I think that in many events, we make a lot of room for them to speak, and then they speak, and then they leave, and they don't hear what we have to say. And I think it's time that we kind of put them later in the agenda so that they can hear what we have to say and what our community needs. And a lot of the work that has already been being done with foreign workers, with migrant workers, and that is still an ongoing fight for all of us. And so I share that, and I'm inspired by you, France, in Quebec, and all the others who are running and seeking office, especially are the young people. And every International Women's Day, I say this phrase that I've made up, and that is, and I share it with all of you, because our Filipinos, we all need to rise up and support each other now. And the phrase is, take your place, own the space, and do it with style, humor, smarts, and grace. There is no need to be shy anymore. We should not be ashamed for running. We should not be modest about it. And we should continue to always support each other in our leadership positions, whether that's running for office or being a campaign manager, being an organizer, or being a tremendous face on the media every single day. And so I share that advice with all of you. And as we move forward together in many of these events and make space at the table for more Filipinos to be there, I reach out and I say, please stay in touch, and please let's continue to strengthen our network and support each other across the country. So maraming salamat po sa inyo lahat. It's really an honor to be in the presence of all of you this evening, and I don't feel alone when I'm with you in this room.
Rowena, I remember distinctly hearing that mantra that you gave a few years ago because you spoke on a panel for CBC for International Women's Day. And that's never left me. And that was, I don't even know how many years ago. It's a powerful mantra. And what makes it more powerful is I've seen you in your career, in your position, in your leadership, live that. So your words are truer, more true than you live it, and you are an example for it. So very proud to be alongside you, no matter where that is. So thank you so much for this one tonight. We're going to move on to our next speaker for the evening, and that is Ms. Mabel Elmore, another trailblazer. She made history as Vancouver's first and only member of the Legislative Assembly of Filipino heritage. First elected in 2009 in Vancouver-Kensington District, now serving a fourth term. She's currently the Parliamentary Secretary for Senior Services and Long-Term Care, a pivotal role, particularly this past year. Ms. Elmore is an active member of the peace movement and has also worked tirelessly on a wide range of migrant, immigrant, social justice, and workers' rights issues. So I'd like to please call on Ms. Mabel Elmore to speak next.
Thank you very much, Maribel. I'm very pleased to join you and friends across the country. I'm joining you from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations here in British Columbia. Thank you very much for the invitation. PATAC, thank you for your leadership and your initiative for this forum, and also really spearheading and moving us forward in terms of the recognition of Filipino Heritage Month. Here in British Columbia, the community was actively supported your call and campaign to establish the month, and we join with you right across the country celebrating Filipino Heritage Month. Maribel mentioned, yes, I was elected in 2009 as the member of the Legislative Assembly for Vancouver-Kensington, and I had the great honor to be the first elected MLA of Filipino heritage in BC, first and only. So I'm still trying to encourage others to run. My mother came from Cebu. She hailed from Cebu. She was a nurse. She came to Saskatoon in the mid 1960s, right on the front wave where the Filipino community, when immigration really opened up in Canada. And I'm second generation. I was born in Langley, raised in northern Manitoba. And I never thought I'd be a politician, an elected representative. I just really enjoyed volunteering, helping out in the community, and I was asked to run. So that was kind of how I got involved. I went to the Philippines for the first time when I was 10 years old, and when I was growing up in northern Manitoba, people would always ask me, "Where are you from?" And I'd say, well, I'm from here. I was born in Langley. And they'd say, no, where are you really from? And I figured it out, as a child, that because I was dark, had brown skin, they wanted to know, they didn't think I was Canadian. And so I said, my mom's from the Philippines. So that kind of got the head nod. So that was my first kind of inkling around, the reality of racism in Canada. And, now today we find ourselves really in a moment of upheaval in terms of the consciousness raising around Black Lives Matter, the context of COVID globally. I think this is a real moment of change, and I think it's a real pivotal moment for the Filipino community. And I've just really enjoyed listening to all the speakers share their experiences, stepping up, being leaders in their community, articulating the needs of the Filipino community and the need to have representation. Here in BC, when I ran as a candidate, I was also out as a lesbian. And people told me when I ran, Mabel, you have to stay in the closet. You can't be out because there's never been a lesbian of color elected, which is true. And but I wanted to work to end homophobia and discrimination. So I said that I can't go back into the closet for that. So when I was elected in 2009, I was the first MLA of Filipino heritage in BC, but also the first out lesbian of color elected in BC, and as far as I know, across the country. So I think that when we look at particularly the representation of in senior leadership roles, we're talking tonight about political leadership, but when we look right across the continuum of business, public sector, private sector, Filipinos are underrepresented. We've heard from the other speakers. And also racialized folks are underrepresented. And this really reflects the reality of systemic racism. And, we're marking 123 years of Philippine Independence Day. And also from my mom's home province, Cebu, 500 years since the Battle of Mactan, where Lapu-Lapu fought and killed Magellan, and also marking the celebration of Christianity coming to the Philippines. So we have that context of colonization from the Philippines and the reality of colonization. We come as immigrants, as settlers to Canada. And so that's, part of the diaspora, the reality of the Philippine diaspora, one of the largest diasporas in the world, and nearing 1 million here in Canada. So I've always said since I was first elected that, and I've seen and I've experienced and I believe wholeheartedly, there's so much potential in the Filipino community. And, I really see that there's just more potential, and I know that there's more that people want to contribute. And so when we look at, the reality of systemic racism in British Columbia, in Canada, the reality is that Canada was founded on white supremacy. And so these are some of the structural barriers that we encounter. But like other speakers have said, people need to come together to organize and to assert, to gain that feeling of confidence, and to step forward. And it's a bigger challenge and struggle. But I think that the time is upon us now in terms of really breaking through. I feel it, I see it, I see a change of consciousness, being raised, and really unprecedented participation from the Filipino community and also other communities of color. To really push back against that racism. We have, I just want to mention you may have heard, many of you, the tragic story of the 215 children, their bodies who were found in an unmarked grave in Kamloops adjacent to a residential school. That's part of the reality of colonization, of the reality of residential schools, and part of the history of Canada that, as new immigrants to the Filipino community, it's important for us to understand and work together and work in solidarity. And in terms of what's happening here in British Columbia with the Filipino community, I'm really seeing a lot of changes. Youth, second generation, getting involved in their communities, connecting and being in solidarity with the Indigenous communities around reconciliation. This is a national project for all Canadians, and really important for the Filipino community as an immigrant community to understand and to connect and work in solidarity for to really build the country that we want to see. So there's a lot happening. There's a lot on the move, and I think this panel really attests to that. I'm so pleased to join you and share a few minutes of my perspective and experience here in British Columbia. And I encourage you all to continue your efforts and really work and encourage the community to become more active, to become more engaged, to step up for leadership, to organize, to come together and really assert your rights, work for social justice, work for dignity. And I think that these values will really pull us together. And I think that's my outlook. That's the view I share. And I think that working together right across the country in our communities for those goals, encouraging, supporting, community leaders to participate, and also eventually run for office. It's been outlined by a number of previous speakers, good, kind of step-by-step way to get involved. But I think that fundamentally, for me, the call is around how do we serve the community and how do we address the needs in the community, and how do we overcome some of these challenges around, systemic racism, marginalization, the call for some of the structural barriers that the Filipino community experiences, in particular around, the need for permanent residency for temporary foreign workers, the need for adequate resourcing for our community and immigrant and racialized communities to address systemic racism. So there's a lot of issues on the table. I just want to close and say I really, it's just been terrific to participate and to meet and hear about, other leaders across the country who's really taking these issues on. And it's a challenge. I guess that's why they call it a struggle. But there's also, a lot to be gained out of that. So I know my time's coming to a close here, and I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me to participate. I want to wish you all a very happy Filipino Heritage Month. And if you're into Vancouver, British Columbia, get a hold of me in my office, and certainly look forward to meeting you in person as we come into this summer and hopefully as our country and the world pulls through the challenges of COVID-19. So thank you very much. And I look forward to, I think we've got another speaker and some cultural presentations and some questions and answers. So thank you very much.
And Mabel, thank you. One of my many takeaways from what you talked about, and might be relatively new if for the community to be involved in politics, is to have a true understanding of what the history of Canada is. Not simply what many of us were taught in school, but what we weren't taught. And so in order to have effective representation, I guess, understand where we are in that broader context, which to me sounds like it would be a relatively new thing. So I found that particularly insightful. So thank you, Mabel. So in our long list of trailblazers, our next speaker, I would say, is the original trailblazer in the Filipino community. And I had the pleasure to learn from and watch our next speaker at work when he was elected as a member of parliament. In fact, the first and the only still member of parliament of Filipino descent. And of course, I am talking about a man who needs no introduction, but it is Dr. Ray Pagtacan. He also served as cabinet minister in both Prime Ministers Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin's governments from 1988 to 2004. Besides politics, Dr. Pagtacan is a physician, a professor of pediatrics, and Child Health at the University of Manitoba, the recipient of many honors and awards, including 2 honorary doctorates, and the Queen Elizabeth II Silver, Golden, and Diamond Jubilee medals. He has been inducted recently into the Order of Manitoba. I'd like to quote something here. He is the epitome of a socially committed Filipino achiever, indeed. And that was from Filipino historian and biographer, Professor Isabelo Cristostomo, in his book, Filipino Achievers in the USA and Canada, Profiles in Excellence. And certainly well-deserved all of those honors. So I'd like to welcome our final speaker for the evening, the Honorable Dr. Ray Pagdaghan.
Thank you, Maribel, and I'm grateful and honored to be with fellow participants, and certainly speaking from the center of Canada. Good evening at magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Now, let me start, as I was listening to the others, and I keep changing my sequence of notes here. Let me start on January 6, 1960, when my wife, Gloria, and I arrived in Winnipeg by car, because we came from St. Louis, where we were for the preceding 4.5 years, 3.5 for my wife. And that's how we started in Winnipeg, January 6, 1968. A week later, I saw a couple of Filipinos following the chapel service and said, oh, join our association, and we are having a meeting. So I went, and where is Jerry? The Dr. Begonia. Oh, he belongs to the other association. Oh, I see. How many are we in Winnipeg? It's about maybe 200 families and 2 associations already. In fact, in a couple of years, they will become 3 with the arrival of government workers. Well, so that in 1968, so January, I joined the meeting. I became a member of the board. I said, we should have a newsletter. Okay, if you would like to manage it, yes. So we did. And my first editorial was on unity. And sort of that started me thinking about the process of how we can come together. So that was my introduction to the so-called community and civic engagement. Then from 1971 to 82, I remember a garment worker, a bank teller, a pharmacy technician, and a baker. All of them had problems in the community. The garment worker had been paid by the unemployment insurance for about more than $2,000, being asked by the department to reimburse back the payment. I spoke to her, etc. So certainly her command of English was not at par with others. Then we lost the case before the panel of referees. So we appealed the case to the umpire. Now the umpire is a traveling justice of the federal court, a real justice. So I was scared. So I appeared before him, and we won the case on the basis of denial of natural justice. She was not given a fair chance to present her case. Anyway, on appeal, we had a new panel and we won the case. She did not have to pay back the over $2,000. The second case is a baker. He resigned without notice because the manager was shouting at him. And because of that, his pay was withheld. We went to the labor board. We proved that it was a legitimate basis to resign without notice. So he got his paycheck. The bank teller had been with the bank, a charter bank, and therefore under federal jurisdiction for 10 years, and always a casual employee, meaning you do not have all the benefits of a permanent employee with the bank. So I called the Canadian Human Rights Commission, the complaint division, indicated the situation, and I said I would like a copy of the record of employment, which was the reason being given by the bank, the record of employment for the preceding 10 years. Well, there was no more hearing. She was given the permanent job the following week. Another one is a pharmacy technician. There was a notice from the University of Manitoba, my institution, and saying you can retire early and there is a package. So she decided she would take the early retirement. After a year waiting for the reply came back. Oh, we had already discontinued the program. Meanwhile, they were sitting on her application. Well, I went to the vice president again. I said, if we would not get the case to her favor, then we would go to the court if need be. The university settled. She was given the full pay that she was entitled to. That kind of community engagement introduced me again to the so-called community advocacy. So from 1982 to 1988, I was elected the National Council President. In fact, Rusty Taruk was the president, and we revived the negotiation. Nobody would like to take the presidency, and I was hesitant because I was scheduled to go to Tucson, to the University of Arizona for a year for my sabbatical. Well, no one getting the presidency, I accepted it, but then the following spring, I had a workshop and established a plan of action for the community, a 5-year plan of action, and we got a good grant from the federal government. So that was sort of again, and it was in Tucson in 1982, 1983, when I was reading the books of Abba Eban again, and the book of Anwar Sadat, the former president of Egypt, and the tremendous work that they did for their countries. And I thought there is something in politics that is really could be fulfilling as I was thinking a possible change in my career. And so that was the so-called political seed that was planted in me. Then I returned to Winnipeg in 1983, a year later. Lo and behold, a racial slur in the community. We went to the Winnipeg Police Commission, complained. After the hearing, the commission said, it is not within our jurisdiction. This is after presenting our case. My weakness, I did not review the bylaws of the Winnipeg Police Commission, but I did ask for a copy as we were leaving. Well, I did not get the copy. A week later, I got a call from the mayor, said, Bill Norrie, Ray, could I ask you to sit on the Winnipeg Police Commission? How often do they meet? Oh, maybe once a month. Well, I suppose it would be doable for me from my hospital work. I accepted it would be a weekly meeting. Anyway, we changed the criteria for recruitment, no more requirement for citizenship, and the very arbitrary height of about 6 feet was sort of modified. Again, sort of you can effect change when you are there and your voice is heard. At about 1985, the Canadian Ethnocultural Council, a coalition of 37 national groups in the country, Japanese, Chinese, Ukrainian, Polish, Jewish, 37 national groups, the presidents convened in Ottawa. And I, on behalf of our National Council, was one of them. We reviewed and revised the constitution and bylaws of the Canadian Ethnocultural Council. Then I was elected after the conference as the chairman of the board of presidents, and then an executive vice president. And in a year, we were able to get an audience with the Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney, and we brought the issue of the Japanese redress issue. And when he said, well, we will address it, I said, Prime Minister, you said you will, but you didn't say when. I said, what do you mean? Because then I made an analogy to cancer. If not treated promptly, it will be too late. Well, we will do it within this year. And it happened. So the Canadian redress issue was addressed. After that, of course, was the Canadian Race Relations Foundation was born. So that's that. Then in 1986, on behalf of the National Council, because of the People's Revolution in the Philippines, the CIDA, the Canadian International Development Agency, was sending a delegation to do a so-called program planning mission for the country. The Foreign Affairs Minister, Joe Clark, at the time, called our council if we could send a rep. Well, I took a leave of absence from the university and the hospital for 2 weeks. I joined as a member of the official delegation. And it was interesting to hear the complaints of the so-called the general citizens and the members of the government. The members of the government would like to have full control of whatever funds we would give. But the non-governmental organizations were complaining to us. So I told the ambassador, Ambassador Davidson, I think he lives, he's originally from BC. And I said, Ambassador, there is an issue here. Could we have a partnership between the two? And that was the beginning of the Philippine Development Assistance Program, Canada, so that a joint venture by both the NGOs and the government. And it proved so well that in 2001, when I was appointed as Secretary of State for Asia Pacific, I had forgotten about it. It was many years ago, 1986. And then one of the program officers came to my office in Ottawa and presented me with a plaque, very meaningful, reminding me of my role in the development of the Philippine Development Assistance Program. So you feel good as a citizen that you have done something that has affected favorably the workings of government. So now my beginning political involvement happened actually in 1984. I was recruited by my brother to help our MP in the riding. I campaigned for him, distributed the literature, and knocked on doors. I even debated at the doors. The poll captain said, "Ray, you do not debate them. You just drop the literature." Oh my God, this is not so fulfilling. Anyway, you follow the orders. I learned the ropes, and the party lost. It was reduced from a majority to 38 seats in the House of Commons. It was a debacle. People, the political scientists were predicting it would take another 20 years before it would recover, the Liberal Party of Canada. So in the spring of 1985, after the full debacle, I joined it. I went to the convention of the party. I took my membership for the first time. I was seated, and as the election for officers was to begin, the leader of the provincial party in Manitoba, Sharon Carstairs, came down from her podium, went to me and said, "Dr. PATAC, I would like you to run for regional vice president." I said, "Sharon, I do not know anybody yet." No, you try to find anybody. And I would find a seconder. So we found somebody. I was nominated. I happened to be the first speaker, a little advantage. As I was going to the podium, I asked myself, what is the position about? And why I am fitted for the position to answer those two questions. After my presentation, my opponent, who had been now an 18-year veteran of the party, was so generous. I agreed, Dr. PATAC, and more or less cut his speech. I think he would like me to win. So I won. And so the first meeting of the regional vice presidents, I had a written agenda, and the other three regional vice presidents from the 4 sections of the city say, "Ray, this is new. We never have written agenda." Well, I am used to having written agenda, having an allotted time, just like the notes that Maribel circulated to us. So that happened then. So that was in 1985. But the meeting, the convention was like, and if you had been to a funeral parlor, it was like a funeral parlor. There was that feeling of really a somber feeling of sorrow and sadness because the previous 6 months ago, the party lost the election. Then the following year, 86, the president said, "Ray, could you chair the fundraising committee?" I said, "No, it is usually given to the established members of the party, not to a rookie." No, we would like you to do it. "Okay, do me a favor. I would accept it if you tell the executive that you would leave to me to do the membership of the committee." And the reason for that was I had discovered since on the executive that there are 2 factions in the city, the so-called Lloyd Axworthy faction, and then there is the Sharon Carstairs faction. And sometimes they do not see eye to eye. So what I did is I get 5 from one faction and 5 from another faction. But to make the long story short, at the end of the day, we had a full house and we raised about $65,000 net. Now, previously, they had the same size, full house, but the funds raised were only about half. And the reason for that was that by the close to the fundraising event, they will give the tickets free to fill the room. So it was getting to be a habit. People were waiting for the free tickets. Well, I put in place a system that when you say yes, we will go to you, bring the check, bring the envelope with the tickets, and then we will collect the check. My wife and I clocked about 700 kilometers with our Toyota car, and we succeeded. So that was my political involvement with the party. And after that, of course, 86, I ran for the school board, and because there was a family sex education issue, and I said, maybe I should really thinking about the real politics. But I must tell you that I agonized long. I really agonized long before saying yes, I would go to politics. The reasons for that were these. The perception is that politics is very ugly. It's a bloody sport. And so what would my friends at the hospital tell me? In fact, when they knew I was running, "Ray, have you gone crazy?" So that is how people think of politics. It's dirty. And unfortunately, a few I would say that most people who go to politics are honest, sincere, and they would really like to serve the country. So I really believe in the nobility of politics, and nobody can shake me out of that. So that is sort of the story there. But then during the membership drive, and I heard Julius about to speak in the membership drive, this is one of the flaws, one of the struggles. Doctor, how many membership? Doctor, they say, why should they pay for the membership when they're the one helping you with their votes? A very good, natural question to ask. But then I said, it is required to pay for their membership, and it is against the bylaws that the candidate will pay for the membership. And if they expect me to pay for the membership, I would rather stay in the hospital, continue to teach, attend to my patients. I will not. If I would like to be a lawmaker, the first thing I would do is violate the bylaws. There was that kind of temptation to do the easy way out. And then I produced the membership that a friend of mine had canvassed home to home, including one family who was unemployed, and insisted when I explained that they would like to be members, husband and wife, even if they had no job. It really was very difficult for me to accept, but because it was the process, I accepted to get that particular experience. So I won in 88, but we only increased our seats from 38 to 83, so more than double. And but we were still in opposition. And then I learned my first political science lesson. An election, excuse me, an election is won due to many reasons. And in the particular election of 1988, it was won because of the standing of the political party. Excuse me. Hello? Okay, I'm just on a Zoom. So can you call back and half an hour later? Thank you. Sorry, yeah. Sorry there. Okay. So that was the thing that was happening in the party. So we learned that the political parties account for election of 1988, and the standing of the leader was about 20%. Fortunately for that election, 27% of the basis for voting was on the basis of the candidate. So I thought that helped because of my connections with the various ethno-cultural groups, because the other opposite party from the NDP was a 21, and the other one from the Tory was the former school superintendent in the area. So I was lucky, I would call it, that I won the election. But then, so I would like to share with you, what are some of the things that I encountered? Well, the first one really was when a Filipina had just been deported. It's public knowledge, Sally Spinelli. I took up her case, and fortunately, Barbara McDougall, then the Minister of Immigration, agreed, and we brought back Sally to Winnipeg. You feel good. There was the HIV tainted blood, the AIDS virus had tainted the blood, and blood had been given to patients with hemophilia. So I challenged the Minister of Health to have a special fund, a compensation package, and then that was done. And then secondly, I challenged the government to have an inquiry to review the blood service system. That was done as well. And now we have a modernized Canadian blood service system. So you can do a few things. Now, when I went to in the caucus then, when I was there, I remember then when I was in the government caucus, another deputy, this time from Edmonton, happened. So David Kilgore, the MP in the area, approached me, a Filipina, said, could you help her? Well, we worked with Eleanor Kaplan, and fortunately, she allowed Leticia to return to Edmonton. So there are a few things that you can do. The Canada Provincial Nominee Program, I happen to be Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. So when the issue was brought to us by the Manitoba Business Council, the Prime Minister gave a signal to the Minister of Immigration, and in less than 6 months, it was finalized, and the minister asked me to accompany her during the announcement in Manitoba. The Philippine-Canadian Center for 900,000 funding, we were able to secure the resolution on the accreditation of foreign obtained credentials. When I was Secretary for Asia Pacific, I headed the Canadian delegation to the United Nations on the small arms and light weapons.
Yes.
July 201. So again, you feel good that it happened. And I presented on the global threat of infectious diseases at the GS Science Ministers meeting. As Minister of Veterans Affairs, and I will end here, we got the funding for the Aboriginal veterans and the former prisoners of war. And also, as Regional Minister for Manitoba, we got the floodway expansion. So you can affect a lot of things as a member of parliament. Now, where do we come in as a community? We could come in because we could give our voice, our insight, reflecting our needs. Immigration policy, accreditation of foreign obtained credentials, to mention a couple. So I will pause here and stop.
Thank you, Dr. Pagdakad. I mean, maraming salamat. There's so much we can learn from your experience and take so much inspiration from it. And I think now we want to get down to why there aren't more who have followed in your footsteps in Parliament. There are many in other levels of government and many who've blazed trails. And still you are the only one who has managed to crack that barrier. So I know that we've opened it up to questions. I know we've got some in the chat that I can put to our participants here. And if you've got more, please put them in the chat and I'll try to get to them, as many as we can before we run out of time. This is the first question that we got in the chat was, what lessons did you learn from your campaign that can be shared with future candidates, and not just the positive ones, but the negative ones as well? So I'm just going to turn to our panel and see if anyone, just wave your hand and then I can see if you are able to answer that question. If you don't wave your hand, I might just call on you. So be ready.
Dr. Ray Pagtakan, I think is.
I'll share.
Okay.
Julius first.
Okay. Several positive things I think that I have experienced in my campaign. One is the selfless volunteerism of people, particularly Filipinos. And I think if, as community leaders, we stepped up and put our name, and it's such an honor and a privilege to have your name on the ballot, actually. It's still surreal for me every time, or at least 2 times that I have been the nominated candidate, and I would see my name on the ballot, or let alone see my name on a billboard or something like that. What a tremendous honor. Filipinos would rally around us. But party politics is very difficult. And this is where I think the negative aspect also of campaigning happens. In as much as I do run for a political party, and obviously there are others who are supportive of other parties, may not necessarily be supportive of my campaign, but nevertheless, silently or quietly, they would come alongside, volunteer here and there. And I think the negative part of that is, though you may not necessarily agree ideologically of the political party that you as a person is actually running, you don't need to bash that person. You don't need to write something on paper about that person and why it is important not to support or tell people not to support a Filipino candidate. I think if you cannot support, then just be quiet and stay home, kind of thing. I am very much willing to cross party line for the sake of a Filipino running. And if that person is in fact worthy of being a candidate, then I would definitely support it regardless of political colors, as I have in the past.
Thank you, Julius. Dr. Pagtaghan, your experience, positive and negative.
Yeah, one positive. When it happened during the nomination, which was the precursor to the election. At the end of my speech, I remember I said, I would speak not for a few, not for some, not even for most, because I will speak for all. When I heard the thunderous applause of the people gathered, 80% of them Filipinos, convinced me that Filipinos agree that we should really speak for all and not be parochial. So that give me the confidence. On a negative side, during the campaign, liquor are prohibited in the campaign headquarters. That is my rule. And then somehow a group of campaign volunteers brought some to the basement. So I said no. For 3 nights, the guy did not anymore come. And then we met up later on, 3 days later. And then one of them said, Dr. Pagtaghan, we could make you lose. We could make you win. A reflex, I told them, when I win, I will thank you all. If I lose, I would blame no one. They help. Now, so you will have this kind of tension, and it may not be necessarily negative, but it happens. And so we have the candidate must be prepared for these differences of approach and opinion in a campaign.
Thank you, Dr. Pagtaghan. Franz, if it's okay, I'd like to kind of get your insight on that too. I mean, you're early into this, into the ring of politics, but given how you described the district that you want to represent, what has that been like for you? I guess when you go door knocking virtually, I don't know how it's happening now. What you have experienced positively and negatively as a relatively new face on the scene there.
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to share, and thank you so much for giving me the space. Even if I'm fairly new, I mean, it's undeniable how beautiful, humbling, and moving it's been just to literally receive those calls from my community, the titas, the lolas, who never imagined and never thought they would see it, especially in somewhere like Montreal, like Quebec, where it is a little bit more of a struggle for the Filipino community because you have to learn French. And it's not the easiest language to learn. So that doesn't definitely create some barriers. It's no surprise that we haven't had a Filipina or a Filipino to ever serve public office in Quebec yet. So if I do win, I'm so honored to take that place. So that representation piece has really, really been big for me. The hardest part has definitely been adjusting to being more public. I was already somewhat public doing community work. I often joke that I am a performance introvert, how I'm a little bit more private and a little bit more introverted, but if I need to speak up and I need to take that space, I'm happy to do it. So I kind of joke that I'm like the silly private girl who decided to go into politics, right? So definitely navigating, learning, how sometimes I do interviews and things get chopped up, how my message doesn't always get across the way I wanted it to get across. I'm very grateful to have an incredibly strong team of people from all walks of life, some folks who've been in politics for a while, some who never have been, but are bringing in kind of like their marketing communication skills, a strong team of Filipinos, and I really wouldn't be able to do it without them. And outside of my team, just really, really strong community where I can be vulnerable, where I can break down when I need to, because sometimes there's a message you're trying to get across and that's really not how it's received or perceived. So one thing that my dear campaign manager always reminds me is that he's like, we're on this journey with you because we believe in you and we think that you're a good person, the best person for this job, and you're qualified. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to kind of let other folks who don't know you know that you are qualified for this job. So, sometimes when you're read in a way that's really not you, it doesn't diminish from who you are and what your skills are. So that's the piece I would like to share.
Thank you so much, Franz. Gary, I'll just open it up to you if you want to add anything to that. The lessons that you learned campaigning that future candidates might be able to learn from, the good and the bad.
Yes, thank you, Maribel. So as I mentioned earlier, we should not just concentrate on our kababayans, even though there might be enough in the area riding to win, right? So you have to reach out like Julius and Dr. kind of saying that have to be people for a candidate and for all, right? So that's one of the lessons I learned. And, in my case, for the by-election, it was more of a faith-based thing. Now, I know it would be more difficult when you climb the ladder up to the provincial and federal level, because now, basically you have to put aside, check your faith and your beliefs at the door, right? And one of our colleagues there who's run for many times, the Conservative Party, said, once you enter the system, the riding associations, they own you. Okay, so, I say, okay, I'm scared about that owning. So I think that's at the municipal level, you're supposed to be just independent. And then that's how, I see that. And that would be very helpful to learn as well. The negative side of it is that, like you said, not everybody would agree with you. And basically, you just have to face the music, right? Especially when you knock on doors, not everybody, I've not seen any aggressive behavior, but, we just say, well, I'm sorry. In our case, it's very hard for those people who want to run on the trustee level, because you don't know which homes are, because basically if you're running at the provincial and or even at the municipal level for mayor, councilor, you don't have a problem. You just lift it at every house. They're qualified. Not all of them qualified. If they're not citizen, they can't vote. But for the other, we have to say, okay, in this street, there are only 2 voters, right? And on other streets, there are more voters. So that's, I even knocked on doors that the Catholic voters are no longer there. The list was very, impact list was very outdated. So yeah, I had some fun at the same time. It's hard work, and all of these people here know what it is to do that. So those are my advice. And, once you're there, then there's another set of issues to deal with. And, over time, I've learned many things that people don't agree with their beliefs. You just have to be open to them. And as long as you listen, then, as long as you agree to disagree in a polite and in a very respectful manner, I think that's the way to go. And I'd like to, again, work very more closely with our fellow kababayans. And like I said earlier, I was, I don't really care, I do my work and I go to the office and come home. But, I think politics is a very noble profession. And I always go by the patron saint of politicians, Saint Thomas More, right? He said, you might be king, but you're not God. So I take that, in very seriously. Thank you, everyone, for giving me an opportunity to share.
Thank you, Gary. This next question, I think, is sort of a big one, and we've touched on it a little bit throughout the night, and that is about engagement in the community, or apathy maybe in the community too. And that is, the question is, how can we slowly chip through the Filipino community's non-engagement in politics, or even on issues affecting them? I right away think of overseas foreign workers, these sorts of things that have become very important in the political sphere, which are things that a lot of Filipinos and kababayan can relate to, and yet they haven't taken that extra step like you all have into the realm of politics to make a difference. So, I think Dr. Bagtakan, you faced it much longer than most. What's your sense of where that comes from, this sense of non-engagement in the community?
Well, a couple of bases for that. One is really no time on the part of a newcomer, and bread and butter on the table would be first. Okay, but I think if we convince ourselves that there is something to it that we can do, if not for ourselves, for others, we may just begin to break that ice and say get engaged. Okay, because there's no doubt it will take time of somebody's. It will take somebody's time. Okay, and the absence of that engagement, of course, we will be taken for granted by society, and that is why, in my other note, that of course there is no time. To answer the question of Paulina, how do we get there? Well, my answer would be participation, and participation. And by that, I mean in the various levels of the political party. And that is membership, fundraising, and policy development, and really in the events. And then policy development is very, very important. And that is what will make it very fulfilling, because we can bring our agenda to the table. And I assure you, it makes a difference if they hear that. Just as I tabled in 1989, when I tabled my motion on to find an orderly process for the accreditation of foreign obtained credentials, it took about 3 or 4 years before it was debated, but it was finally debated when we were in government. And so it was given a national exposure. And in fact, in Toronto, I think in the 94 or 95, there was a big conference on accreditation of foreign obtained credentials, chaired by Jane Stewart at the time, the Minister for HRDC. So you can effect a change. So I would tell our kababayan to please find time. It is not easy. I can understand that. But please find time. If we put, as I think I read in the document of Paulina, a draft, if you put them all together, it can be powerful. They can be a powerful set of drafts.
Very wise. Thanks, Dr. Pagdakhan. Would any of our other panelists like to add to that in terms of your view on how we increase the engagement of Filipinos when we can see a lot of the issues affect us and our communities directly?
The session that you did, just this very one, this engagement, this is a model. Unfortunately, this is by Zoom, and some of us are not used to the technology. At the same time, it saves us time because we don't have to travel. So it is. And I think we should utilize the modern technology and through the leadership of the media. Without the media participation in our activity, it will be a very difficult to advance. So media participation or the utilization of media is very critical, so that participation can be facilitated by media engagement from our media and engaging our friends in the media, whether they're from the Philippine community or not. In fact, if I were still in Parliament, I would tell Maribel if we can have a symposium on media and election participation, because participation in the electoral process is not only a problem among Filipinos, it is a problem as well among non-Filipinos. So it is a general citizenry issue. Okay? I think we have a better tendency to be engaged, but we have to give an incentive. And I'm yet thinking about that. And maybe I'll bear you I'll thank my mind. With the Filipino Heritage Month, I am thinking of talking to the St. Paul's College at the University of Manitoba on this very issue. And that is, can we have a conversation series like the one that we just had with you and under the organization of Paulina, that we can continue this and use this as a model to continue to engage the communities? I think it can only benefit, may not be immediate, but it can only benefit.
I do love the idea of a symposium of some sort, because I think there's a disconnect as well sometimes from what, in the political sphere and those in the media. And it's fascinating to me to be on the media side of it and to watch it unfold. So it would be, I think, very useful to share insights between our two professions on how, just on the raising engagement. And you're right, perhaps not just in the Filipino community, but overall, because it is such an important thing. If our other panelists quickly want to add on to that, feel free. And I think otherwise,
sure.
we might have wrapped up. Okay, Julius.
If I could just add a little bit. I think it is, we may lament on the lack of participation of Filipinos in political engagement, or at least being part of the political process. But it is also incumbent upon us who are already involved to actually develop a process, perhaps even within the political party that we may all find a home in, that we can begin to engage actually people who are more or less, leaning towards a certain political party, that you begin to engage them. I have started doing that among younger Filipinos, 40 and under. And then at the same time, every time that there is an election, try to recruit as many people as possible to be part of the volunteer core of different riding associations, because it needs to begin there. And so I think if I can just simply encourage everyone, particularly those who are already politically engaged, those who have put their names in the ballot, on the ballot, as well as those who have sought nominations and so on and so forth, that, let's continue to be engaged and continue to bring even one person with you in your own journey. Even though we may not necessarily be successful in winning an election, but it is a process. It is a process. And it takes a little bit of time and effort to really make sure that we do get Filipino-Canadians elected. In politics and political involvement, particularly those in party politics, where you begin with a nomination process and then eventually run in the general election. It is a life disruptor. It really is. And you wouldn't believe the kind of sacrifice that you, your family, and your business, your career would have to put up with. It is a disruptor. And if you're not prepared to be truly disrupted and to be a public figure where all kinds of stuff would actually come at you, then don't. But if you're prepared to do that, be prepared to be disrupted in everything.
I'd like to just add something, if that's okay. Thank you, Dr. Ray and Tito Julius, for all those important insights. But I also think that level sometimes is a little too advanced for some folks. I think it's really, really important to have different entry points and meet people where they are at in their political journeys and political understandings. So I think that it's important to make a point on the importance of planting seeds. I think that it's never too early to kind of plant seeds for these conversations, but finding a way to make it accessible. So one thing I'll do a lot with youth when I walk around in parks is, I'll often see our basketball courts are often full with Filipino youth, right? And then there's the youth on the sidelines kind of waiting. So I'll ask them, I'll be like, don't you think it'd be a good idea if there'd be more basketball courts here? Because our community plays basketball. And they're like, oh yeah. And they start thinking about it. And I start asking them, do you know how that happens? Do you know how we make that happen? And then you get them into this political conversation from a place that they connect with, so really find ways to meet people where they're at and plant those seeds. And it's okay if they're 16, they're going to be voters in 2 years, right? And they're our future leaders. So really starting to find ways to engage in these different conversations. I've done the same things with, some elders, titas who love to do Zumba, and they do it for fun in the park in the summer, and in the winter, they don't really have anywhere to go, or they're renting spaces at the Black community center. They're renting spaces at the Jewish community center. So I engage them in conversation, and I'm like, what would it be like if you could do Zumba at a Filipino community center? Wouldn't that be great? And building the conversation from there. So just want to highlight different entry points, being accessible, and never taking for granted the power of planting seeds. Thank you.
Yes, Maribel. Hi, Maribel.
Okay, go ahead, Paulina.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question. I know it will take time for our community to really elect the adequate number to be our voices in the government. So in the meantime, what should the Filipino community do to make sure that our voices are heard? So can we do lobbying? How do we encourage our MPs to bring our agenda as Filipino community into the table? So I know probably the MPPs or the MP can answer that.
Yeah.
Well, I think if I can answer quickly here to Paulina, I think the comment of Dr. Patrihan earlier is, be involved in the policy process, and every MP sometimes, would again, the importance of being a member of a political party and being active in a riding association, so that you do get the invitation coming from your MP for any of the policy input that they may be seeking from the community, and they send this as an email to everyone, and whoever responds, gets to be on the table. Now, it doesn't mean that because we have not elected anyone yet, it doesn't mean that we should not be part of the discussion and contributing, our policy ideas around the table of discussion. And so it is so important that we get into that level of involvement, into that really, really, I would say, primary level of involvement in policy making.
Thank you, Julius. Dr. Pagtakhan.
Yes, there are already models in the community. We listen to a good number of lobby groups in Ottawa. When I was in office, the women's group are very strong. What it means is that you will go and ask for an audience with all three major political parties. You will meet with them. Meanwhile, you will have prepared your issues, the top three or at most five, and said, okay, how would you address these issues? And I feel the three major political parties, in other words, it will be a non-partisan approach to the parties. All of them will be invited to hear us on the issues processed to us. It may be accreditation, it can be Medicare, it can be representation, voices in Ottawa. We decide on what are the top five issues, not too many, otherwise caregivers, not too many, focus, helped by the professionals in the community, by the media, marketing people who had that kind of experience, and we get together, and preferably with representations from the 10 provinces and 3 territories to indicate the scope and the breadth of our community. No political party will decline that opportunity to meet with us. None, because it is an opportunity for them to sell their own policy platform in the future. So that's to our advantage. One example, the Filipino caregivers were part of the women's group, and they were asked, what is your top issue? And they said, well, Medicare. Well, Medicare is always a top issue for everybody. So when I was giving them the advice, this was a few years ago, I said, what is the issue that is closest to your heart, aside from Medicare, all of us? Well, really, our plight, make it your only issue when you go to the lobby group. When you go to the women's group, say, what are your top issues? Our plight in Canada. We have no visa. We are being abused. That is your only issue, because if you choose 3 and they happen, Medicare is there, they will get Medicare and they will forget about your real issue. So that is a strategy that has to be developed by the lobby group. And so that group, they did listen. They had only one issue, and that issue was brought by the women's group before the members of parliament.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Pagtakhan and Julie.
Very good, Maribel. Good work. How can I get a job like that?
Yeah, I could ask you the same.
when you visit Winnipeg, please drop by. A call, and Gloria and I would be glad to have you.
As soon as COVID is over, I'm going to visit Winnipeg. So I will see you there, Dr. Pagtakhan. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you, Paulina.
Thank you.
I am just marveling at the excellence, the level of, at all levels here that we have from our kababayan, and just a reason to be proud for so many things, but just one common thread. And we are diverse as a group anyway, but I think one common thread has been that every single member of our panel is an advocate for those people who don't have the voice and who don't have seats at the tables. Each of you has taken on many causes on behalf of members of our community. And more often than not, you're getting those causes dealt with at the level that they wouldn't be without your help and without your advocacy. And so I think anyone who has been a part of this evening has been very lucky to get the kind of insight from each of you. And hopefully we can turn that experience and the insights that you have shared into more engagement from our kababayan and more representation. Because in the roles that you've played, you've all affected change. And it's so important for our community to see that and to have those examples. So my own thanks to you once again for doing everything that you've done for the community and for our adopted homeland that I know we all love so much. And formally thanking all of you for sharing your stories with us, your experiences. Thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. Hope that you were also able to gain this important insight into our kababayan's journey into politics. And we also want to invite you to other events to celebrate the Filipino Heritage Month this June. PATAC's last event will be on June 26th, and that one focuses on a brighter future, which I'm confident we all have anyway. But we have a lineup of even more inspiring and brilliant Filipino-Canadian speakers. So you can visit us on Facebook, become a member, and take part in the final installment of this series to celebrate Filipino Heritage Month. I want to say salamat as well to Aliyah, Senisa Razul, to Marianne Tolentino, and to Joey Moreno, the behind the scenes folks who helped put this together and make it, I think, quite a success for the night. Another reason to be Pinoy proud. Paulina, some closing words?
Yes, thank you everyone for participating tonight. And I hope this event does not end here, but it will. There's so many inspiring stories and messages about how we can practically really help in electing our kababayans to office. And so let's continue the conversation and let's do something, forums like this. I know it's not popular to our community, but we have to just start doing it again and again so that we provide a venue for them to talk together. Yeah, so thank you everyone.
Thank you, Paulina. Persistence is key. Thank you, everyone.
I leave now.
Okay. Yes.
It's done.
Hoy, tara na o tara na. O kay haba ng pila. Huwag magtutulakan, huwag mag-aagawan o sa pantry ng bayan. O tara na o tara na. May kamatis at okra. Merong ampalaya, may bigas at itlog, sardinas at dilata. May isang dalaga at meron ding lola. Nakipagsiksikan, nakipagtulakan. May musmus na bata na nakatunganga at nangarap ang kalam na sikmura. Lahat nagagalak sa naisip na paraan na kahit na konti gutom naway malagpasan. Hindi nagpatalo sa problema ng bayan. Nag-people power na itong mamamayan. Si Aling Patring ay biglang dumating at nagpasikat. Visayas, Mindanao, nagpantry naman din. Mas mabuti na ito